Have you ever told a little white lie? Just a small one? Maybe you said you finished your homework when you hadn't, or you pretended to be sick to get out of a chore. We've all been there. But what happens when those little lies start to stack up? Today we're diving into a story that's as old as time, but more relevant than ever. It's about a boy, a village, and a very serious lesson about trust. Stick around, because this story might just change the way you think about honesty. Let's set the scene. Imagine a quiet village nestled in a valley, surrounded by rolling green hills. The villagers were simple, hard-working people. Every day, a young shepherd named Leo took his flock of sheep up to the hills to graze. Now, Leo was a good shepherd, but he had one major flaw. He was incredibly bored. The days were long, the sheep weren't great conversationalists, and all he had for company were the birds in the sky. One afternoon, overcome by a wave of mischief and boredom, Leo had an idea. It was a naughty idea, but it seemed like harmless fun at the time. He took a deep breath, cupped his hands around his mouth, and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Wolf! Wolf! Wolf is attacking the sheep." The effect was instantaneous. Down in the village, people dropped their tools, abandoned their tasks, and came running up the hill, armed with pitchforks, shovels, and anything else they could grab. They were worried about Leo, and they were worried about their precious sheep. They charged up the hill, hearts pounding, ready to face the beast. When they reached the top, panting and out of breath, what did they find? They found Leo, rolling on the grass, clutching his stomach, laughing uncontrollably.
Ow.
There was no wolf. The sheep were grazing peacefully, completely oblivious to the commotion. The villagers were not amused. They were angry and annoyed. An old farmer shook his head and said, "Leo, this is no laughing matter. Don't cry wolf when there is no wolf." The villagers grumbled and marched back down the hill, feeling foolish and tricked. But did Leo learn his lesson? Not at all. In fact, the attention, the drama, the sheer chaos of it all was the most exciting thing that had happened to him in months. A few days later, the familiar boredom crept in again. And so, he did it again. "Wolf, wolf, help. The wolf is back." Once again, the villagers, though a bit more hesitant this time, rushed to his aid. They thought, what if it's real this time? We can't just leave him. But when they got to the top of the hill, it was the same story. Leo was laughing even harder than before, pointing at their worried faces. This time, the villagers were furious. The village elder looked him straight in the eye. "We will not be fooled by you again, Leo. You have made your choice." They turned and left, their trust in the boy completely shattered. Life went on.
Ow, the sun rose and set.
The sheep grazed. Leo continued his lonely watch on the hill. He thought about crying wolf again, just for the fun of it, but even he could sense that the joke had worn thin. The villagers below went about their business, and whenever they heard a shout from the hills, they'd just shake their heads and ignore it, assuming it was just Leo's foolish games. They had stopped believing him, completely. Then one evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long spooky shadows across the hills, something changed. A pair of glowing yellow eyes emerged from the darkness of the woods. A low growl rumbled through the air. This time it wasn't a joke. A real wolf, large and hungry, was slinking towards the flock. Panic seized Leo. This was real. This was terrifying. He scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs. He screamed with all the might his lungs could muster, his voice raw with genuine fear. "Wolf! Wolf! Please help! It's real this time. A wolf is here." He yelled and yelled until his throat was sore. He screamed for help, for anyone to listen. But down in the village, life went on. A few people heard his cries, but they just sighed. "Oh, that's just Leo again," one said. "He'll never learn," said another. They ignored him. They had been tricked too many times before. They didn't believe him. Why would they? Up on the hill, Leo was all alone. No one was coming to help. He watched in horror as the wolf scattered his flock, the terrifying sounds echoing in the twilight. He was powerless to stop it. The consequences of his lies had finally caught up with him, and they were devastating. When a shaken and tearful Leo finally returned to the village that night with only a handful of his sheep, the villagers saw the truth in his terrified eyes. But it was too late. The damage was done. An old woman put a comforting hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Nobody believes a liar, Leo, even when he tells the truth." That sentence hung in the air, a heavy and painful truth. Leo had lost more than just his sheep that day. He had lost something far more valuable, the trust of his entire community, and he knew deep in his heart that rebuilding that trust would be a much harder climb than any hill. So what's the takeaway here? This story isn't just about a boy and a wolf. It's about the currency of trust. Trust is like a fragile piece of glass. Once it's shattered, you can try to glue the pieces back together, but it will never be the same. The cracks will always be there. In our own lives, every word we say either builds or erodes the trust people have in us. It might seem harmless to exaggerate a story to make it more interesting, or to make an excuse to avoid a small responsibility. But each one of those small untruths is a tiny crack in the glass. Over time, those cracks can spread until the whole thing shatters. Think about your relationships with your family, your friends, your colleagues. They are all built on a foundation of trust. When you say you'll be somewhere, they trust you to show up. When you promise to do something, they trust you to follow through. When you share something, they trust you to be honest. This trust is what allows us to connect, to collaborate, and to support each other. The moment that trust is gone, everything becomes harder. People start to doubt you, second-guess your motives. They stop relying on you. Just like Leo, you might find yourself completely alone when you need help the most. Not because people don't care, but because they no longer believe you. The moral is simple, but powerful. Your word is your bond. Honesty is not just about not telling lies. It's about being a person whose yes means yes, and whose no means no. It's about being reliable and truthful, even when it's difficult. It's about understanding that our credibility is one of the most precious assets we have. Once it's lost, it is incredibly difficult to earn back. So let Leo's story be a reminder. Let's strive to be people of our word. Let's build our relationships on the solid rock of honesty, not the shifting sands of deceit. Because in the end, nobody believes a liar even when they're screaming the truth. Thank you so much for watching and for letting me share this timeless story with you. If this resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories and reflections. I love hearing from you, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on trust and honesty. Till next time, stay true and take care.